This is the story of a man who wants to go home. Home for him is Greece. Once it was his kingdom, but he's lived in exile for the past 26 years. He is Constantine II, the last reigning king of Greece. He's determined to return.
I'm absolutely convinced that I'm going back to Greece. But the condition for that would have to be that my country is completely free and the people have decided that they want their king back.
It's time for us to go back to Greece as private citizens, as a family, to see our country, see the sights that they've never seen, have a summer holiday, learn of their Greek heritage, and just have the feeling that one can go back to one's homeland again.
The Greek royal family has a short history, which begins here in Denmark. The Danish court provided Greece with its first modern king, George I, in 1863. Nearly a century later, his great-grandson, Crown Prince Constantine, returned to the Danish court to find his future queen. How old were you when you first set eyes on him?
Actually set eyes, I was 13, barely 13. My husband's family came on a trip through Europe by car and ended up in Denmark. They were going on through Norway, Sweden and so on. And so they came to Denmark to visit the family, and I remember we thought it was frightfully exciting. Here comes a family from Greece, you know, the Greeks. It was sort of like miles away.
What did you imagine the Greeks would look like when they turned up?
Oh, no, I mean, I didn't think they were going to look sort of frightfully different from what we looked like, but it was just somehow rather exotic, I think. And
finally, anticlimax.
No, not at all. No.
Do you remember that
I do,
time?
yes.
Well, he doesn't remember me.
He does remember you.
I'll tell you who did remember you was my father.
I know.
What did he say to you?
No, he didn't say anything to me, but he said to my mother, he thought she was like a little butterfly.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think of her?
Very sweet little girl. I mean, I was, at that time I was about 18, 19.
Yes.
He had just come of age and begun official royal duties. The only son of King Paul and Queen Frederica, Constantine had understudied his father since boyhood. He was a dashing role model for the nation's youth, but the prince had other things on his mind. The Danish princess Anne-Marie. They were secretly engaged when she was 15, he was 21. What impressed you most about him at that time?
I suppose the person...
Shall I leave the room?
No, you sit there. No, please sit there.
No, I think the personality. I don't know, I just thought he was wonderful. In March 1964, after his father's sudden death, Prince Constantine became king. He was 23. He took the oath of allegiance and swore to stand guard over democracy. Soon after, he made his first official appearance as king, but without a queen by his side. His teenage fiancée was waiting for her 18th birthday when she could at last marry him. His partnership with the Prime Minister, George Papandreou, was not such a happy one. They quarrelled over who should control the armed forces. The Prime Minister resigned and the government collapsed. When was the first inkling that things weren't right, that it might lead to your personal unhappiness in some way? I suppose on the 21st of April.
Probably.
The night when the military dictatorship took over. I suppose that night I suddenly realized that things were not as calm as perhaps I had thought they were.
In April 1967, a band of colonels seized power to crush what they saw as rising communist strength. They claimed to have the king's support. The king's position remained unclear. It was the major enigma of the crisis. In London, protesters accused him of supporting the dictators and accepting their regime. And indeed, the king did carry on as head of state under their rule.
In the 6 months that I stayed while they were in power, I was trying to organize with the armed forces and with people that were loyal to the crown and to the democratic process, a way to overthrow them. And we made the counter-coup on December the 13th, and we failed. And I thought the time had come then to leave, because if I stayed, I would only have succeeded through bloodshed.
And you just, what, one night fled? You took a plane and left the country?
I took the decision, now we leave. And that was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. And the family left in a very small plane from a tiny little airport with no radio communications, no lights, no radar, and a storm.
So you didn't really think you were going to go?
I didn't even have any clothes other than what I was wearing on me. I didn't even have any money with me. Nothing.
So you left with nothing?
Nothing.
And you went to Italy?
And we went to Italy, yes.
In the early hours of December the 14th, 1967, the king flew into exile with his queen, his 2-year-old daughter, baby son, mother and sister. They carried little luggage, but a huge burden. The king had failed to deliver his people back to democracy. At the age of 27, he'd reigned for only a few years and faced a humiliating defeat. You don't feel that you let your own people down?
Yes, I suppose you could think that, but the problem is that they might have felt that I was letting them down if I stayed on as a sovereign who was doing nothing. Nothing to help them get their freedom. And at least I made a supreme effort. I put my throne out on a limb and left the country to avoid that bloodshed.
Looking back, was there any period in that time, that 6-month period, that you felt you misjudged or you did something wrong, or if you had your time again, you would do it differently?
I would have done the same as I did before, but I would have done it better. I think I certainly misjudged a lot of things, but please remember that I haven't the faintest idea how to make a coup d'etat.
Athens was once again in the grip of the military regime. The colonels tightened their control, rounding up the Navy and Air Force officers who'd backed the king. They dismissed the royal coup attempt as absurd and went about erasing the symbols of monarchy.
It really didn't occur to me that we would have to leave the country. It really, I'm sure people think, oh, I'm sure you thought you might have to leave or whatever, but it really never occurred to me.
So what did you leave behind in Greece?
Everything. We just walked off and that's it. And it just shows, I mean, material goods really don't mean much, do they?
In exile in Rome, the king remained as Greece's head of state. Another child was born, and the Greek royal family lived well enough while their country was ruled by intimidation and torture.
I stayed in Italy till the end of 1973, about 6 years. The Greek Royal Navy made an uprising to overthrow the colonels again. And that didn't work either. A lot of Greek naval officers were very badly tortured in prison. Then the colonels abolished the monarchy on June the 1st, exactly the day before my birthday. And from that moment on, I decided that when that was over, that we were going to move and come to Britain.
In November 1973, Greek students called for a national uprising against military rule. Some died for their cause, but the colonels were losing their grip. Then they failed to defend Cyprus against Turkish invasion. It finally led to their demise. The Greek constitution was restored, but it was unclear if this included restoration of the monarchy.